I'm going to minimize that because I don't want to look at myself. So let's say this is for me.
Yeah.
Let's say this is for my podcast, and I'm going to edit this heavily.
I hope in actuality you cut nothing out. You just leave it as is.
My hope is that I can say things so awful and outrageous that I would have to.
Okay.
But there's really no way.
Sounds good. Yeah, whenever we've done this before, it was for my thing, and you know, it's family, whatever. But it's fun to go into it with the idea that it's for your thing. And I'm so happy that you do have a channel.
Right now, I'm enjoying the privileges of having no audience.
Yep.
I've already just gone on the record saying the weirdest things,
as it should be,
about how I feel about all of this. So it's like I can say my strangest positions on things and my strangest positions on art, and I know 5 people will hear it, but it's still on the record. Yeah. It's done. I have it out there.
What's great is doing that up front. You're front loading the process, because in my case, I'm trying to be, let's say, that pure self later in the game, right? So just kicking it off with it and saying you're shortcutting the system.
I guess so. So I'm just opening with the utter insanity of what it feels like to having been doing art for 20 something years.
Hearing that makes me tired.
It is kind of crazy though.
Yeah, and I've always told you that, you know, you should make a channel, a podcast, something, because what I got to witness living with you for 2 years, I want the world to see. And maybe you haven't done all of Steven Zapata, the spectrum, online yet, but I imagine and I hope that you will.
If it's a natural part of me, it will manifest at some point.
The other day, you were doing stories, and then, oh, hi, dog. Come here. And then you were just recording something, and your window was open, and somebody was blasting music, and you sounded like you were upset. Like, who is playing that song? It's so good. I want to know the name of that song. I was like, yeah, that's Steven. Hi, dog.
Hi, pupper.
You want to pick her up? Or
you want me to take?
I mean, I'll hold her.
She sees something's going on here. She needs to be involved.
Dog.
Here, you want?
Yes, please.
Look, she's on the podcast now.
The Borkcast.
The Borkcast. How do I hold her? Take her body. I'm trying. Take her dog body.
Okay, she's growling.
No, she growls at me. If I pick her up and I throw her on, I'm like, look, you're coming with me to bed right now. We're gonna go cuddle in bed. She's she's just letting you know, like, well, I don't want to do this, but fine.
All right, I want one. I want this exact
You should
dog.
get one, man.
I can't. I travel too much.
I guess that's true.
Real quick, the reason I'm even here in New York, because obviously we're in New York because that's where you live. I'm just visiting because, like, I'm sure some people might see this and be like, you were in New York and you didn't do a meetup. You didn't even let me know. It's like, I'm only here for a few hours. Like, I'm just driving through.
Literally, you're here for like 4 hours. That's
not
crazy.
even spending the night.
That's crazy. Yeah,
I'm mostly here for the dog.
I'm very glad you're here.
All right, we had some good conversations as we had lunch and grabbed coffee, and we're like, oh, this would be great for the podcast. Unfortunately, I forgot all of it.
Me too. You know, like, goals, like, what are they though?
Yeah.
Like, what does it really? What does that mean though? I'm often in a mood where I'm just like, what happens day to day is great. You know, just whatever happens, this is what I draw today. This is what happens. I'm in a mood lately where I'm thinking like the other side of the spectrum, where you're like, what's the long-term plan? What does this become, right? And, you know, there's all sorts of conditioning factors for that. You know, you look at your finances, you look at what you've been doing, you naturally want changes, stuff like that. I'm trying to be very okay with admitting that I don't know what I want, and I also don't know what I want from being an artist in the most foundational sense. We know what the good advice is. We know what the good advice to hand out is, right? It's like, know what you want, know what kind of artist you want to be. You get that portfolio together.
It's that easy, right?
You aim it at, like, see, that's the thing. That's the thing. We know that's not easy. We know that's ridiculously hard.
Because it's like also asking the question, who are you?
Yes.
What is your soul?
Yeah.
I never thought I'd be that guy that was like the hippie, like, you got to find your soul, let it breathe onto the paper. Like,
but that's it.
That's the only thing.
That's it. It always comes back to that. Once you've gotten that cursor stuff out of the way, it all goes into ridiculous soul stuff.
The thing that we were talking about before, as advice that I give to other people and people give to me, because it's hard to take your own advice. But this, and you said it in a good way, where you surrender to the will of whatever the universe might present to you, and not try to force it into what the ego might want you to do. Like, oh, I want this to be something that looks cool for whatever, or good enough to impress people, but instead to just get out of the way and let yourself be the vessel through which, like, the experience that you have as a human go through you and then come out. So if you have like an idea about this cool little Mega Man plushie, and that's an idea that's there, it's knocking, you just do it.
Yeah.
But once your ego kicks in, especially for me, it's like, well, no, that's not the style we do. That's not what we want to be perceived by. We want to look serious. We want to do sharp rendered stuff. And like, but the willingness to, like you said, surrender to the will of all those ideas that you have. But it's like, it's easier said for, I think, us, because we already did the professional stuff. We've been there. I guess
that trips me up a lot.
We're I guess talking about when you've gotten to a certain point and you're asking, now what? You know, so
how can I say this with a straight face to people who are on sort of the other side of that hill, when it seems disingenuous coming from someone like me, because I imagine, because I dumped so much time and money into the skills, right? I feel like it gives, it must seem like, yeah, it's easy for you to say,
bye-bye. But even that, like, talking about this, it just so happens to be the experience I'm having. And so be it. That's what I'm going to express. So, like, I could have a concern for the 14-year-old me who's on the other side, hasn't reached a certain, let's say, skill level or professional degree, which I do. I have instructional content for that. But like right now, I guess, because like, I'm on that One Fantastic Week podcast with Pete Morbacher and Sam Flegel. It's the questions that happen after you've gotten to a certain point. And so I don't know, I'm just a broken record right now, but it has a broken record quality. Yeah, I feel like it's unavoidable. Which is the curse of it.
Yeah. I feel like right now, with all my art goals and art ideas, I feel like I'm operating out of like a space of the unknown. First thing on my priority list on art right now, this was not always the case. Point number 1 is I have no idea what this is.
Okay.
That's point number 1. My foundation is that this is mysterious and strange.
Right.
That was not always the case.
Right.
That's new. I don't know what decides my interests. I don't know why I'm interested in those things. I don't know why I like the art that I like. I don't know why I feel the way I feel about my art, which is always something different. Love it, hate it, doesn't matter. It rolls, and the vast majority of it, if I'm honest, 98 to 99%, if closely scrutinized, is out of my control. Is out of my control. At this point, it felt much more in control when I was sweating perspective, when I was learning anatomy. Those years where it was, what is 3-point? What's 2-point? How do cones of vision work? Where do the muscles insert? How do things flex? How do things bend? When that was the primary function of my art and my practice, ironically, that felt like it was more in control. And that's the grasping stage, right? That's like when you're really struggling to get better and like gain your foundations, right? Now looking back, I'm like, that was really when I had the most solid idea of what that was.
Right.
Because now that stuff runs on autopilot, take like the deltoid, right? If you start consciously thinking about that deltoid, right? If you actually tried to do it from the ground up, right? Like remembering, like, there's the head of the humerus, that's where the insertions are, it goes up to the clavicle here, spine of the scapula there. The whole thing falls apart. It rolls best when it's rolling.
It's second nature.
Yes. Yeah. All that stuff runs on its own. Everything's getting out of control. It's all mysterious. It's all strange. I don't know from whence this comes now.
Right. And so if we frame that in the question of what do you do now and why, and the answer is it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Right. So let's put it in the context of, well, let's say we need to do this for money. Fair enough.
And we do.
Yeah,
I do.
And so, let's say you're doing artwork specifically to garner security, etc. You might have to angle your work in a certain way and pitch it and have it marketable. Fair enough. And then you do that. But let's take that out of the equation. If all that's left is, well, you're living a comfortable life and you're just floating in the universe here on planet Earth, whatever, and then you have these technical foundational skills of drawing, what do you do? If it's not about making money, is it about your identity? If so, I think that might be like a pitfall. Or is it about just expressing what is?
Right.
Right.
But then, like, what is the?
But you don't ask the question. You just let it happen. I think because, like, sometimes I'll, have moments when I can like really be alone and think for a long time. I can envision all these cool ideas, not even cool, just like ideas that come knocking, and they come all the time, left and right. And so it's letting yourself get out of the way, because if the ego's in the way, you start to pick and choose and try to figure out what would serve your ego or your identity or the big picture of social media. And that becomes a tough question to answer, because we all want to be, perceived as well, as good artists and whatnot. But the willingness to be okay with anything that shows up, not anything, but in the sense that stop trying to force the muse to fit to your, let's say, superficial desires. Does that make sense? And I find that when I'm in that mode, that mentality, art just pours out, because like I'm doing this current project and it's easy. It's like I've just clarified like what I feel, and it's what the human experience I've had makes me feel, and I could put faces to them, and I've turned that into a project, rather than, okay, what would be cool? What would be the thing that I want my identity perceived by, to be perceived as? And that's a hard question, because that's us trying to be in control. And the more you try to control the outcome, the more rigid it is. And as an artist, I don't think that's a good way to go.
I agree. Yeah, basically on all fronts. The identity thing is a little, again, I think the audience thing is, I don't worry, or not worry, but I don't think much about my identity per se,
right.
How it's perceived.
I did.
You always had an audience, though, basically.
If we rewind a bit, before I even had an audience, my biggest concern was how I'm perceived. And that was like, a lot of people go through this, you see the field of people playing the game, and you're on the bleachers, you're sitting down, wanting to be the hero of the game. And the reason I wanted to be the hero was reasons about insecurity and wanting to compensate for, at the time, low self-worth and value. So when I say identity, it's more like a natural result of most people's journey of trying to climb this ladder that we can call the game art, right? So I think
you don't mean specifically like how your style is seen as an artist. You mean as like just like a success story or something like that, like who you are as a person.
That's my point of view, my experience. Now for you, I think I don't think that's the same story at all. So the concerns regarding identity, it's not like, I don't think you're controlling it or wanting to curate it, but rather you're just like, this is who I am, so be it, and you're okay with that.
Trying to be.
Trying to be.
Sure. Well, so the trying to be is like, this is hard to put. I truly feel, this is hard to explain. God, what words to put this in? If I draw a sexy grandpa, I'm like, today's a sexy grandpa day. And if I draw some mythical old shit, I'm like, today I feel mythical and old. Like I don't feel dissonance on that. I feel more like what am I trying to be okay with? It's more like I have a strange sense that I could just make art in a cave forever and never show anyone.
Okay.
Never do anything with it or something like that. Or even like I could just drop it forever.
Yes. Okay, let's get to that.
There's days where I'm like, yeah, the artist thing could fall off for good.
What would you do?
I have no idea. I
don't either.
I'm sure I would spend a day like that, and I'd be like, I could just draw again and wind up drawing, because I really do love drawing, right? I don't know. I would do something else creative.
Right.
I definitely have to be a creative person.
Storytelling?
Yeah, maybe write something like that. I don't know. Drawing is definitely what I have the most skill and proficiency in, you know?
I think a lot of what we deal with is partly a result of being in a bubble, right? Whether it's starting in 2009 at Art Center when we started, which started the whole, I guess, story arc for me with all of this. But being in the bubble with only artists all the time and seeing artwork and your friends are all artists online and all this stuff, you don't see the world from a different perspective. So when I get home and I talk to other family members and friends and stuff, they're in a completely different world. And so when I tell them what I do or something, it's like, it doesn't really, they don't process it in the same way we do. So it begs the question, like, what would it be like to willingly leave the familiar bubble and do something completely different? Volunteer at a gardening place, right? Or, get a job doing something that's completely on the opposite spectrum of freedom and creativity. And then you let your organism, as an organism, exist and function in a place that's completely outside of what you normally do. I think that's something that would give us perspective, at least for me, that I would benefit a lot from, because my whole life has been this, right?
I agree, yeah.
I think from that experience, it'll help answer the questions that we're putting forth now, like, what do we do? What is the art? Where are we going now? It's all uncertain, but I think stepping outside of it and forgetting that it even exists. Yeah.
I'd like to. And then it just comes back to practicals. It's like, I can't do that right now because I have like a family. I need to be supportive and all that. Like, art is how I make money. It's the only way I've ever been able to make money, you know? So once the practicals come into it, it's like, right now that's not feasible.
So,
you know?
Let's talk about that. What's your kind of trajectory for that in terms of using art to make money? Because you're doing some freelance work, or you did some ad agency stuff, and now you're building the YouTube thing. So where do you see this going? Also, I think Deirdre texted you. Cheers.
I think what would be ideal for me would be helping people with art. I mean, like, helping them, not like...
So not just here's how to do perspective, but rather getting into the psyche and like helping people?
Yeah, because that art really helped me. Right. Like, especially after my dad died, right? Like, so my father's suicide was basically a complete shift in my life, right? And it would be for anyone. And that tuned me in to what was happening with my art almost immediately. Like, it was a one-to-one. It was like an immediate switch in the way I experienced my art and my career. That I don't know if it would have happened otherwise, but it changed my thinking completely. Like, the first big thing was, so my dad dies, right? And we go through the whole normal thing. So I'm down in Colombia. I have to, we do the wake, funeral, all of the things there. I go back to New Jersey with my family for a bit to just settle everything, because it's a big traumatic event, and everything sort of just gets turned completely over, right? And then I'm up there in Jersey for like 9 days, something like that. Then I go back to LA just going with the flow. I was telling myself that I was more okay than I was, right? Looking back on it now, it's like I should have taken like a month off. You know, I should have it was like I spent like 5 days down in South America and then 9 days up in New Jersey with my family, and then I was just right back. I even like went basically right back to work.
Pause and resume.
Yeah, just exactly. And one of the things that stood out to me most in that period was, and I had always noticed this before, was if I sat down to draw, it all went away. Which I don't think that's alien for anyone who's really into drawing, right? Like I'd always known, like if I'm stressed about something, if I sit and draw for a while, I can get into a place where I forget about the stressor and I'm just drawing. I'm just doing the drawing, and I'm interested enough in the drawing that I'm not thinking about that other thing. When that happened, like the first time I drew after my dad died by suicide, and I sort of came back into it, and I was like, I had this moment where I was like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, that just happened. That's like, I know that's messing with my head right now. That's like a huge thing to have roiling around in my head. And still, my mind was like, what's this hand feel like? Is that flow correct? Like, is this a good sketch? Is this not a good sketch? When I came out of that and sort of snapped back into the context, right? I was shocked. I was like, how is that possible? That's very strange. Right. I didn't take that for granted. That started like a whole new chapter for me.
So it was like a flow state kind of thing that you were in, and then you woke up from it, and then
which again, that's not unusual. Yeah. Like I spent most of my time doing my work in flow for years before, but
the context and the contrast of that moment,
it seemed, I did not expect that was possible. Like when I sat down to draw that first time after my dad's death, I was like, this is going to be a tough one, but we got to do this, right? The fact that it still was powerful enough to whisk me away. When it was whisking me away from homework that I didn't want to do or a fight that I had with my girlfriend, that didn't seem big. Like it was useful all those years in college, high school, everything.
I'm starting to see this. Okay.
Yeah, it was a small thing. I was like, that's nice that drawing can whisk me away from that. When it whisked me away from this real existential crisis that my father's passing put me in, I couldn't take it for granted. Right. I was like, this is really, really quite odd.
See, I have never had experience like that. So to hear it's nice to see a validating thing that art can do for you.
Yeah.
And so you're saying that this experience with your father's passing and suicide, that it brought you to this realization that you sort of already had an inkling about. This is what you want to bring to the table for others.
I think so. It's hard to know for sure, right? Because it sounds more like, and it feels sometimes that what I'm talking about is like some form of art therapy, right? Which is like,
fair enough.
There's degrees in that. Like that is a thing. But the way art therapy works really has very little to do with the skills or like the repetitive process of drawing as we do it, right?
Isn't it just like, look at this painting kind of thing, or do a thing? And
I'm not actually quite sure what happens in like real art therapy or anything like that. I've done some research on it, and I haven't done enough that the convergent parts make sense yet. All I'm seeing right now is how different all the methods seem. I don't really get like what's unifying.
So what's your take on it if you were to try to frame this for someone else who's maybe struggling, and how they could possibly be whisked away through this process to ease their troubles? Is this what you do on your YouTube channel?
Yeah.
Because I don't watch your stuff.
You shouldn't. You don't need it. It's not for you.
I don't have time, but I'll check it out.
I do. That is basically what I do.
Okay.
That is what. I'm trying to Trojan horse it. They're basically like drawing meditations. They're like these little. You're drawing, and I'm tricking you into thinking that I care that you're drawing. I'm really not a lot. Like I'm Trojan horsing more this self-awareness.
There we go.
And feeling what's going on, because the whisking away, it's difficult for that to happen if you're caught up in, I'm doing this drawing because of my career. It's very difficult to get whisked away, irregardless of the quality of my career in art. The majority of my work that I've used to get jobs, that have gotten me jobs, the majority of it is stuff that I'm like, all right, this is in the portfolio after the fact. Like, I don't, it's been very rare for me to sit and curate and be like, this is it. It's going, I'm doing it for this reason.
That's the worst place to be.
But it works for tons of people. I still give that advice, even though I don't do that. I still tell people, like, set a goal and, you know.
That gives me anxiety, because it's like trying to curate something and force it. But that's because of the things I haven't resolved for myself yet.
And I'm sure that for me, the same, of course, there's some conditioning factors that's making me do my practice in that way, you know, whether they're apparent to me or not.
I wanted to ask, so you're talking about art on a different level, or just taking action, whether it's moving your hand and making circles or anatomy. Let's call that physical action in the direction of something, art, soccer, gardening, whatever, which has a meditative quality. And I find that experience when I'm really in the flow zone, the flow state of doing a piece of art, or if I'm driving a really long distance and I'm feeling it. I wonder what your take is, because you've also practiced meditation for what, like a decade now or something?
It's been a while.
Talk about that, like, because I've been wanting to ask you too, because I want to understand meditation, like by just sitting there, and like what is that experience like, and how is that similar, if at all, to what you're referring to when you're drawing and being whisked away?
It's basically one-to-one, and this is a weird conversation, because what I'll say about meditation is sort of the insights that you get in meditation after doing it for a while. But, and if you get a good teacher, right? If you follow a good program or something like that, or you read good stuff, they'll still like tell you everything outright. But there's a certain amount of, it's not real until you experience it.
Fair enough.
Kind of a thing.
Can be explained as be experienced and understood.
Yeah. So sitting meditation is basically a gambit. It's a trick. Sitting meditation is a trick that you play on yourself, where you tell yourself, I'm sitting and doing something right now. I'm meditating, right? That's a con. You're not doing anything. You're just sitting.
That's okay. There. That answers a huge question, because it's like, am I doing the thing wrong, the thing right? You're not doing anything, so it can't be wrong or right.
Exactly.
Oh my God. I'm getting goosebumps.
That's it. That is
finally.
That is it. It's all a trick. Yeah. So you sit. The truth is, you're not doing anything. You're telling it's a gambit to get you to sit and do nothing by thinking that you're doing something, because we're horribly anxious species.
Right.
It's like, we are sickly afraid of doing nothing. We're like, I gotta do something. If you spend too much time doing nothing, you beat up on yourself, you get existential fast, it gets bad, right? So you sit, you do nothing. And then there's the further gambit of meditation is a something you're doing where you're just noticing all the somethings that are happening. When it's a nothing that you're doing, where you're noticing what happens when nothing's happening. So you're peering at just the ground floor of what it is to be you. And you find out that the ground floor of what it is to be you, for all your effort, even though you said, I'm sitting here and I'm just going to be peaceful and I'm going to sit and do nothing. The ground floor experience of being you is that you sit, and for all your best intentions, stuff goes in and out of your head. You don't ask for it. You couldn't guess for the life of you what comes next. It surprises you most of the times what you're thinking. You can't suppress it. You can't control it. You can try to distract yourself.
So it's an active observation, but it's not an act, because it's nothing.
Yes.
Okay.
Indeed. Yeah.
But it happens to be an observation.
It happens to be an observation. Yeah. You're getting it quite well. So what you find is that the ground floor of your experience is this constant flow of just that. just of observations. That's all that's happening. You're just...
Rather than repeating, I'm trying to focus. I'm going to focus now. I'm going to not breathe. I'm just going to breathe. Like,
So that's where you start.
Yeah.
And then after a while, you sort of settle. You start to get like, fuck, I'm being tricked. This is this is all nothing. It's not anything. There's no controlling this. So then you settle back. Then you just sit and you are aware. You're just observing, right? So now you're observing the act of your observation. And then
it's 2 steps back looking.
And then that gets crazy because you're like, fuck, I'm observing the act of my observing, and all my observations are arbitrary. I also can't decide if I'm in the next moment going to be keenly observing or distracted. Even that seems to flow.
Okay.
And there's very little mapping it. And then, so you're doing that, and then it's like, and then that turns on itself, and then you're in an infinite mirror loop, right? Where you keep trying to catch yourself. You're trying to look at what's looking, right? And then the final turn is just that regression. There's no end. There is no final looker. All that ever was the act of observing. That's why the regression is possible. It's the constant observation. That's the only act that's happening. There's only what you're aware of, and then that excludes everything you're not aware of. Yeah. We're far in there.
This is good stuff. So here's a question.
Okay.
2 people, exact same people, parallel universe. One person goes through their life in the same journey, art, doesn't meditate in the same fashion, but the other one in the same journey does meditate often. What would be the differences in their lives? What are the benefits, and like what is this one missing out on?
So I am of a group of people that would maybe is not, let's say, popular these days for why you would meditate. So right now in our current culture, anything that, let's use mindfulness, which is like these days, if you
buzzword.
Yeah, it's a buzzword. If you see a flyer for a meditation class, it's probably going to be labeled mindfulness, right? That is often billed as reduce stress, feel calmer, stuff like that. It is presented in a little package with a bunch of benefits, right? I agree with most of those things. I think it does help with a lot of that. But I'm of maybe a smaller group that I don't think that's why you would do it. Okay. And I don't think that's why you should do it.
I see. Yeah.
I think that instead, I think it's self-validating that it's unbelievably interesting. I think that is enough. And I also think that that's the only way to recommend it in good conscience, because guess what? Life is hard and we all have trauma. If you sit and watch your thoughts, guess what? They're coming up. Yeah. You're going to think of all the bad stuff. So at that point, I have to sort of offer a disclaimer. Like, if anyone out there is thinking of meditating, taking it up, they haven't done it before. If you think it's going to be a purely blissful experience, it isn't. It's a confrontation with the self. Yeah. So like I said, I do think it helps with reducing stress, right? Sort of the stuff that's billed often, not for everyone. And I don't think that's the main reason to do it. Right. I think it's become sort of self-validating on the fact that it's unbelievably interesting what happens in that space and to learn that about yourself.
So it's I don't want to see if I use the word transcendence, because I know you do transcend a certain part of yourself.
You can use the weirdest words you want. I have had the weirdest stuff happen while meditating. Like, you're not going to spook me. Right. Nothing's going to happen.
I guess what I'm saying, if I offer the word transcendence, it's more of like I'm going to elevate myself kind of thing, but rather to move beyond. I sound like that guy, like the hippie guy, like you got to just like let go and separate your soul. But really, I feel like that's when you're in the flow state, when you're doing something meditative, therapeutic, you separate from your, I guess it feels like it's an out of body experience. Yeah. And call that transcendence, call that having a good time, call it observing, but that seems to be why I would do it. It's like to be in that zone, because I feel like that's the most human that I could be. Does that make sense?
I think so. Yeah.
Because like I don't think, I don't know. We could frame that in like so many different ways. Like, well, to be human, it means to interact and share and be in a loving community. Yes, but I think there's something that certain music makes you do too. Like Tool just came out with a new album, and they're all about spirituality, meditation, all this stuff. And their music does that too.
I didn't know that about them. Is that true? I never really listened to Tool.
Very much so.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I guess that makes sense with all their album art and all that.
Yeah, and actually, really cool. Adam Jones, the guitarist, he's really into art. His wife's an artist. She does like portraits and studies. And I was watching an interview, and my the guitarist of my favorite band he's talking about John Singer Sargent.
Nice.
And I'm like, wait, what?
That's dope.
He's talking about mastery and craft. But yeah, most all the people in the band are very much about getting yourself out of the way so that the art can speak.
Yeah.
And like, funny thing is, the main singer, he was being interviewed, and the guy asked him, he's like, hey, it seems like you have a history of rejecting people when they ask you for an autograph. Why don't you sign your CDs or whatnot? And he goes, why does it matter if I sign it? Why don't I just go ask the bartender or that guy over there? It's the same thing. We're just people. If you're saying that the song really changed you, go ask the song for an autograph. It's not me. And I'm like, that's where I want to be.
Yeah, there's a dude who crossed over at some point.
Yeah.
That stuff is not available in ordinary experience, I hate to say. It's just not. Especially not to say that to someone in like a situation that presents societal pressure. It's like you have to have had something happen to go through that.
But I guess what I'm saying is like, their music, certain art, certain stories, certain just meditative states. Not that I've meditated too long, but it pulls you away, and it's almost like the awareness and cognizance that you have, which is unexplainable, could be quantum. I don't know what it is. What is consciousness? What is a soul? I don't know.
Let's talk about that forever. Let's do that.
Absolutely. But I like it. It's terrifying and thrilling, but also calming, and so
to think about,
and tear-inducing. Like some of the stuff, like I'm just in tears, like in the moment, like letting it happen. Yeah. And I think that's the most like, we're such artists. What's wrong with us?
I know.
Can't we just be normal people?
Dude, I get sucked into
serving pizza. Like, why can't that be us?
I know. I get it. I get that exact same thing. I'm like, oh God, this feels like this is the sanest part of my life. Everything else is what feels crazy. It's like, yeah, it's very hard to put into words. And it does have the danger of slipping into the platitudes, like saying those key phrases that we're afraid will make people tune out, like talking about transcendence and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it's like there's just not a lot of words available. Like in our current culture, we have about 1 billion words for everything that happens online. But what happens in here, there's like 6 that we've been using since the 70s, and no one's come up with new ones, So it's just the vocabulary hasn't really expanded much recently, and the words are maybe, I don't know, a little tried and tired, but the experiences are not. The experiences are not tried and tired.
There's a lyric in one of the songs in the new album, which, by the way, I'm going to their concert in November.
Oh, fun.
The song is Descending, and the way they present the build-up and the music and the ups and downs and the time signatures, they use weird signatures where it's odd, but it lines up eventually. It's whatever, but it builds up to this idea of stir us from our wanton slumber, like, okay, we're kind of like sleeping souls, whatever, and it leads up to this idea of waking up, not waking, but like, and it's so hard to explain.
It's hard.
Stuff,
I know.
To activate the part of you that's deeper than all of this, and this part, when I was hearing it, I was in tears. Like it gripped me, and it was like sound the dread alarm through the primal body. That line,
through the primal body,
I got goosebumps, and I was like, it was dangerous because I was driving and like I couldn't see, and like it was like, oh man. And then it goes on to one drive to stay alive. And you'd think it's like a rock song about like killing, death, metal. It's nothing. No, there's spirit happening here, man. Like,
yeah, it's all spirit.
So going back to my question earlier, like that state, how do we frame that in the equation of mark making and making art and identity and all that stuff?
So
what's your take on that?
Well, my method, because like I said, I've taken some first forays on the channel into trying to
yes
express this, and it's right now I'm basically I'm Trojan horsing these mindfulness principles. There was a point where I realized after doing the observer thing long enough that I kept having to give things up. I was like, okay, so I'm not the thoughts. Okay, I'm not the feelings in my body. Okay, I'm not my reactions to things. Okay, I'm not my hang-ups and my preconcept. I kept having to give things up and release things. And it eventually I had to give up divisions between things. Like I was like, it wasn't, these surrenders weren't conceptual. They were suddenly believed. I knew they had to be true. Like just, they had conceptual roots, and then they just eventually crossed a point where it was known, like the way you know 2 + 2 is 4. So one of those things among many was that I was like, everything that's happening here, sitting, meditating, this is what drawing is. This is the same thing.
Okay.
There actually is no difference. When that happened, it became very clear to me how to just map those experiences to what happens when you're drawing. Because So first on the channel, I'm sort of trying to chart that course, right? I'm trying to lay out that map, and it's very simple, right? And there's only so much I can do. I just need to point people to what it feels like to do the work, and to try to encourage people to be aware. You know what that's like because you're constantly self-aware about what you're feeling and what you're thinking while you work. I mean, you make the charts, you make the maps, everything. You're hyper self-aware. I think you and I are very much on the same page with that. I feel like I'm engineering little mental techniques that will try to switch it for people. My favorite one, and the one that I think about personally the most, is so flow is a big fixation because that's the biggest state change that I think we experience in creative work. Even people who don't do it a lot, who don't draw a lot, even any creative work, right? They have some familiarity with the sensation of losing themselves in the work or really being in it, right?
Music, art,
yeah. And they don't have to be great. Even complete amateurs.
Why should they?
They don't. Clearly not. They can just enter flow accidentally. And
kids do it all the time.
Yes. It's available to anyone. It's available to anyone. Flow is a big fixation because it's so well known. A lot of people have some direct experience of what it feels like to slip into it. So I've spent time and I try to build techniques around the experience of that flip and what that feels like. Now that's hard because it's natural in the state of flow that there's no metacognition.
Right.
You're just doing the work. Right. So I sort of have to gate it at either side, right? Like coming out of it or trying to go in. And for me, the big one is we're very visual people if we're draftsmen, right? I can't try to ascribe this to musicians, anything. I know what it's like to experience these things through drawing. The one that I like to think about and the one that I'm trying to hand off to people is if you're really aware of how you're seeing, right? Like right now, we're in this room. We see everything here. You and I, having gone to art school, having tried to learn how to paint, we know the sensation of let's abstract all of this and just see it as flat on the picture plane. Right. Colors and shapes that have their own nature. They're not objects anymore, right? We know what that's like, right? And that's, I feel like on a lot of art journeys, that's a step. Of learning to what you're really seeing and not what you think you're seeing, right? That's a classic art platitude, right? Draw what you see, not what you think you see. That has a sensation. There is a sensation to being, I'm in dream mode where I'm just seeing concepts, right? Like microphone, cup. And then there's like, let's call it drawing scene, painting scene, wherever it is, where it's like, it's flat. This is what's presented. It's not the idea, right? There is
photons. It's just photons.
Yes. So there is a sensation change in doing that.
That's cool you pointed out. Yeah.
It does feel different, right? So I say, if you open up to that, right? If you feel that, if you know what that's like to feel like as an artist, right? You see that there's that sensation change. You're doing that in the world, right? You're aware of the way you're looking at the world around you. Now just while you're drawing, right? Now add a couple things to that. You're looking at what you're drawing, right? Let's say you're sketching from imagination, right? You're going to apply that same broad, no concept experience, right? Just raw input. You're going to apply that to everything that's going on in this moment. So there's the drawing, there's the sensations that are happening in your body that are supporting the drawing, and there's the thoughts that are happening in your mind, either about the drawing or not, right? That's buffeting them. And you're just going to feel that. And then I like to focus specifically on the vision. You're drawing right now. What are you seeing while you draw? So when you're looking at the paper and working, and especially when you're not in flow, you see the thumb-size portion of your drawing that is in focus, right? And you're like whisking all over it and you're doing it. What I propose and how I experience this a lot of times, and what I think if other people can sort of keep the awareness running and sort of experience, if there's enough awareness, right, while it's happening, is that when you slip into flow, right, and your vision just happens to be a very solid marker of this, what are you seeing when you're in flow? Because my thesis, my proposition is, you're not really.
You're gone.
You're just the drawing, right? Yeah, there's no concept of your body, of these thoughts.
That's exactly it.
And you also, the fucked up thing is that you're not even aware even of the drawing.
Right.
It's almost like all you are is the next step that needs to happen to the drawing with no concept of whether that's good or bad or why, where it came from. And you're gone.
100%.
You disappeared in that moment, right? Yeah. There's no real vision. There's no conscious awareness of vision, of bodily sensation, of thought.
You're not thinking about the past, future, who's going to see it. You're just in it.
You're emptied out. And if that's not nirvana as described in meditation, what is, right? Because that's whatever the old words are for that experience, the unborn, the unconditioned.
The third eye.
Yeah, all of it. Yeah. Could it be anything but that, in the fact that it's not even that you're doing drawing well. There's no room to have a concept about it. It's just happening now.
And this goes back to what I was saying earlier. The universe, since you are an extension and part of the universe, that's when it takes hold and you get out of the way.
Yeah.
That's exactly it.
For you to get out of the way, it's not that you're standing to the side. You're gone.
You're gone, yeah.
You're really gone. Yeah. You're truly gone.
So you asked the drawing for an autograph, not me.
Yes, that's why when I heard that, I was like, he went through something. That's not available in normal experience, really.
Hi, dog.
Hi, Fanny. She knows that she's meditating all the time.
Yeah.
That's what interests me.
You want to understand that and share that and help others get there.
I'm trying to hand that off, I think. And this wasn't always the case for me. Like, even when I'm beating up on myself about a drawing, right? Like the most classic experience of the artist. I just did something and I'm judging it and I'm like, that wasn't really good. Is this really helpful, right? Like, even those moments now are more often being conceptualized as, isn't it interesting that I feel that way?
Oh.
Why do I feel that's so? Because I know that this isn't really that. Like, even those moments are now getting recontextualized as these very interesting illusions. You know?
I wish we could take like this medication or some kind of pill that lowers our IQ by half. So we don't have to think about any of this. Because that's our curse. We think too much. But you're right.
I'm like trying to just think my way to relaxation. Which is like so ironic. It's so ironic. But I think
kids aren't. I watch my 4-year-old niece draw. She's not thinking about any of this.
No.
You should see her drawing of the sky. It's just a blue scribble up on the top. It's perfect.
It is. It is.
To her, at least.
Oh, no, totally.
Yeah.
You can't draw like that. Like
No.
anyone who like whenever you hear someone say like about like, oh, anyone could do that. Oh, that looks like a kid drawing. I always want to turn on them and like, try.
Yeah, I do.
Try to draw like a kid. I try. After all these years of building skills, I can't do it. It's hard to draw like crap in the traditional sense. And it's, I don't know, it's ironically harder.
Which brings that Picasso quote, which I won't say because I forgot what it is exactly. But yeah.
That one really makes sense after a while, right? It really does. It's hard to unravel. Kids really do have just the direct access to that ground floor.
This is such a good conversation. You got to come to Ohio. We'll do podcasts there.
Okay,
come on.
I'm very happy to do that.
Yeah,
not when it's you guys are probably going to be inundated in like 16 feet of snow pretty soon.
This is true. This is true. Yeah.
That's how I feel. I think about all that. Clearly, I think you could tell I think about it a lot. Oh, yeah. Right? And then, but you asked me this because you were like, finances, like, where do you want to go? I say all that, and it's like, sure, make money off of that. Especially because I really, and this is another thing, it's like, I really do feel like that is a truth, some sort of direct connection with what it means to be people and human. Like you said, like that feels more human than a lot of other things. Yeah. So it doesn't feel right to gate that or charge for that. You get what I'm saying? Like, I feel like that's something that should be available to everyone.
So you're bringing that to the table because you're experiencing it and you're just like, I got to share this because, well, there's other Stephen Zapatas out there in the world and, they might have a different name or whatever. What would you say might be the difficulties or the things that might be causing resistance for a lot of people to get to what you're talking about?
So there's the first obvious layer of resistances, I think, which is like worries about career or social position, or I sort of lump that all into what does this drawing mean, right? Like there's a surface meaning to a drawing a lot of the time that is it's insistent if you're thinking about it or you're really focused on it, right? It's like, if it's a portfolio piece, it's got to fit the idea of the portfolio. Sure. If it's for a client, well, that's a whole other, like, do your job, right? Like, get it done for the client. Yeah. But like, even if it's like,
that's the eating your vegetables part.
Yeah. But then there's even just, if you feel like you're in a skill building phase of your life, that is such like a wide context that you might not be able to ever shake that off, right? Like, this drawing is to build my skills, right?
Indefinitely.
Yeah, that could really be there for basically an infinite amount of time. So there's sort of that first layer. I don't think that needs to disappear. I don't think they can, right? Like, at a certain point, you're in the world and there is context for what you're making, but they need to be put in their proper place. And there needs to be the belief, the understanding that they're allowed to be dropped at any moment. If they are thought of in a way that you really think they're real, like they gotta be here, right? I do think that gets in the way.
Okay.
And then underneath that, then there's just the problems with experiencing or going for something like that on its own. Then there's problems of like, I'm not worthy of feeling relaxed about this. I don't deserve to enjoy this, or
imposter syndrome,
things like that. And then there's, let's say, more, and then the final layer I would say is more institutional, societal gates to that. There is just a societal mood right now that it's like, it's weird to feel that way. Like, you're just drawing, relax. Like that's odd. Like, and then there's tons of even advice from professional artists that's like, drawing isn't hocus pocus. There's nothing weird going on. Just do your work. It's just
that, right?
Yeah, it's just that, So those sort of, let's say, institutional or societal or cultural gates, if you get hung up on those, I think those also can hold you up. You can just get a feeling that this is all getting too woo-woo or it's too weird, and you just need to, I'm a brass tacks practical person and like drawing's practical.
I experienced that whole story arc. Still am. And I think one of the biggest culprits is this feeling of as I'm doing a piece and I'm not in a flow state, but rather under the pressure of those things you're talking about, there's like a process or a program or an app in the task manager of my brain that is running, and it simulates potential scenarios of how people receive it, perceive it, and whatever, and react to it. And it shows all potential outcomes and what this mark will result, and it'll be this like, you know, quantum frequency of potential outcomes, and like that weighed down so hard on me.
Right.
Like, and sometimes it's not so bad because it's like, well, if I know a certain person's going to see it and I know they like cats, throw a little cat in there because whatever. But it can be really bad if it's if you have low self-esteem and you really want to be perceived as good, as I did. It's like I'm going to do this drawing and I really, really wish and I hope that the reaction is, oh, wow, that's awesome. That's what I really, really, really want, because I never had that growing up or something. That got in the way for me so hard. But now that I'm digging in and, you know, discovering all this stuff about meditation and applying that to art and realizing that there's tangible moments that become intangible, if you will, that I want to learn to get out of the way for or not be a part of it, so it just happens. Yeah. So, you know, it's definitely a good conversation to have, and yeah, we are pretty woo-woo, aren't we?
I think so.
Let's name the podcast Woo Woo Episode 1.
Oh, that sounds good.
Yeah.
It's the full woo-woo.
Yeah.
It's hard.
Spiritual energy, bro.
It's weird that even in art, that's thought of as strange, right? Isn't that?
Yeah.
Like
it's abnormal to be something brought to the surface in conversation.
Yeah.
For most people.
Yeah. You would think if there was one place where it'd be normal, it'd be in art.
Yeah.
Especially in drawing, where it's like, you know, you're making your own little world every time. Like, now I'm on the other side of the fence, where I spend most of my time being like, it's abnormal to see drawing as practical or simple. Sure. It seems paramount to me, or prominent to me, that drawing is deeply strange. And it's sort of weird to pretend it's simple or commercial or practical, or that there's any way to get a grip on it. It's odd.
You mean there's no 1, 2, 3 step of figuring it all out? If you had low IQ, I think it's that easy for you.
I wonder. And it's hitting us in the face, right? Because like every artist, you know, like everyone has a completely different path.
Yes.
Right? Like no one has the same thing at all. Everyone's path is.
And why would they? If they did, it'd be boring.
Yes, exactly. And so that's so obvious.
Or inhuman. It just wouldn't be human. It would be robotic.
Yeah. But we all talk like, it seems like a lot of our advice comes from a place where we're pretending everyone's path is the same.
Yeah.
You know?
On the One Fantastic Week podcast, Pete brings this up, and how he hates hearing this idea of concept art mountain that everyone's trying to climb.
Yeah, what is that?
It's like, oh, that's the path. That is it. That's because like John Park's that good, Craig Mullins is that good, and Ian McKay's over here. But it's this one mountain, and you're supposed to climb it and snipe off everyone that's trying to climb it with you, and it's like. That's such a good analogy of what it feels like sometimes within this industry.
The sniper. You're in a ghillie suit.
Yeah. It's like, oh, I'm going to learn something that they're not going to learn. I'm going to take them out. Like, wow.
We really made ourselves crazy.
But it really is just, it's not, I mean, the mountain analogy is good for like the idea of going on a difficult, struggling journey. But it's more of like a foggy swamp that sometimes you're alone, sometimes you're not, sometimes you figure things out, sometimes you don't.
Yeah.
So
yeah, a swamp is better. Yeah. And some people are just like in the mud, and other people are grasping to a tree limb. That's really more. That's more.
And some people are just floating above the water, like Ian McKay, just waving at us. Hey, how's it going down there?
He's like in a helicopter, like looking at the swamp. Like, there's a lot of people down there.
Yeah. Back to you, Jack.
Anyway.
Yeah.
And
when I saw him at Lightbox, I finally got him to sign my book.
Oh, good.
Shadowline. But as I mentioned earlier before the podcast, like I wasn't starstruck in the same way I was before. It was more like acknowledging a fellow human, who happens to be an artist, but still he's in his 50s maybe or something like that. He's you know, but he had more energy than anyone.
He seems like a very high energy guy.
He was like just like marching along with a smile, like waving to people, and Gregory Manchess, how are you doing? And just like, I'm like, who is this person? What is?
That is so strange.
But I don't idolize them in the way I used to. Same with Mullins. Like I used to. You remember me back in Art Center, like they're the best. But now I'm
me
like,
too, man.
Yeah, it's just, I don't know.
How many hours did you and I spend over other people's art, drawing lines and analyzing and tracing shapes? And it really, back then, it really felt like there's a science to this and we will unlock it. This is the Manhattan Project. We're going to build the bomb and we're the bombs. It really felt that way.
You remember when I had my Eureka experience of simultaneous contrast?
Oh, yeah. It was like a religious conversion.
Dude, I still to this day freak out about it. And like people on my Discord, like whenever I bring it up, they are like, oh, here he goes again. Like,
yeah, I was there. I was watching. I was like, whoa.
Simultaneous contrast. Even if you Google it now, it doesn't explain it the way that I see it.
Yeah, man, values. Cool, dude.
But they pop.
They sure pop.
One thing I forgot to talk about, going back to Tool, this was just floating in my back burner. So I mentioned Adam Jones and how he talked about John Singer Sargent and he's into art. So he follows a lot of art, like artists that we know on Instagram, and they're on tour soon. And he hired a bunch of artists to like make posters for them, and of course art that's related to their style.
I've seen that on Instagram, I think.
Yeah.
Like in the past couple days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of them being Eliza. Do you know her work?
Yeah.
She's in art for Tool. That's
dope.
So cool.
She didn't tell you? They were probably on NDA about it.
There's that. And like she was 2 tables down from me at Lightbox, and it was so unfortunate because we didn't even have a second to like hang out or talk.
Yeah.
And it's so cool that she did work for them. And
that's dope.
Some other artists too.
I think I saw that like Miles Johnston was doing something.
Yeah.
For them. That's so rad.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah. Man.
Yeah, they picked very good, and of course they got like Alex Gray on there, but he also did like covers for them before.
Yeah, most of the covers
like that, right? He really did something amazing. Like he set the standard for like this is what transcendental art looks like, right? And it's like very hard to escape that. I don't know. I think about it now because I think about that stuff so often now, and what the art. He seems to talk about it, like how strange the art experience is, and all of that.
Did you see his TED Talk? Or heard him in interviews?
Yes. Yeah, I've seen that TED Talk. I think I've seen like one interview with him before. If you're going to cross into those realms, if you're going to treat your art in that
so directly,
right? It's like, does it need to be that direct? It's like I don't feel like I could do that. It's like
it's amazing, to be honest.
It is amazing.
I wouldn't put it on my wall, but I see it.
No, it's nuts.
Yeah.
It's nuts. Yeah. No, same impression. I'm like, I wouldn't put this on my wall, but I'd totally go see it at a museum. Like, it's just so aberrant, and it is special. It's something very special. One of my sister's favorite artists. She loves him.
Really?
Oh, I think he's a lot of people's favorite artist.
If we want to make this like a proper podcast, we have to do what the other podcasters do, like Joe Rogan. So he always talks about the same things. DMT.
Totally.
Psychedelics, art, man. Alex Gray.
Yeah. Burn it out.
I've never done it.
No one's advocating drug use here.
Yeah, cut this part of this.
Weird things happen when you're meditating.
Yeah?
The weirdest regular thing that happens to me
with meditation?
If I have my eyes closed, right? If I focus on my visual field with my eyes closed, and I just try to put all my focus on the darkness behind my eyes, and I just try to concentrate on that. If I do that for a while, I'll basically hallucinate things for split seconds, like see things, and it basically has the quality of a dream. Like, like
lucid.
It feels like a lucid dream, but it's like that, like super short bursts. But I'm not asleep. It's like I'm aware and I'm not tired. Like I can just get up and stop meditating and it's done. I'm not making any claim that I know at all what's happening, but in fact, even this isn't that weird for me to say, because I think I've actually said this on my channel already. I've talked about this before, but I'm looking at darkness. I'm aware of darkness. And then the same way that if you're making a sandwich, you might be in a visual imagination, right? You're like thinking about someone you saw or something like that.
You're in 2 places at once in a way.
Yeah. So if you feel the belief that let's say that process, you're making a sandwich, but you're back at the bank when you saw that other person and they're just in your mind, right? If you can accept that that might be an arbitrary process that comes and goes in your mind, really without your will, then it's open to happen while you're sitting there looking behind your eyes.
Oh, okay.
So it just comes, and then I'm there. It appears for a split second, and then because it appeared, I'm aware of it, which ends the dream. So it's there.
It's the quantum state.
Yeah.
You observed it, so it doesn't exist.
It's crazy. But it's, for that split second, it is seen as real as anything.
That's amazing.
And then when it dissipates, it leaves like that glowing after image that's always behind your eyes. Like if I saw a microphone, it's like, it disappears. Right. It's the weirdest. That's amazing. That's fun. I'm interested in it because I can't decide what I see. And it's not anything special. Sometimes it's stuff that makes sense with recent experiences. Other times it's totally banal stuff. Mm-hmm. Other times it's very strange indeed.
Yeah.
But I have no idea what will come.
And because you've been meditating for so long, mm-hmm. At which point were you starting to notice these, let's say, avenues of meditation?
That's very recent. That's like within the last 5 months.
Very cool.
I'm tempted to say that has something to do with being a very visual person. Also because, we just spend so much time trying to understand what things look like.
Yes.
Thinking visually.
Here's a question, probably not related to all that, mm-hmm. maybe tangentially.
Totally.
There's a topic that came up on my server for my Patreon Discord about being able to visualize things. Uh-huh. Some people have something called aphantasia, where they can't even imagine what something looks like. Even if you say imagine a red apple, you and I think we could visualize that, but other people can't, and to varying degrees. And so I was talking about this, and I was describing what degree my visualization is capable of. And I think if you open up like a ZBrush thing and put in some objects and light it and texture it and rotate it and put the lighting here, add some more lighting, see the Fresnel effect, look at the details, that's what I can see in my head. I have all these parameters I can control. I could add things to the scene. I could visualize a full anything and pretty much really high resolution. Mm-hmm. Can you do that? And I say full resolution more like it's like I'm dreaming it and I can see it.
There's been times where I've tried to like willfully do that. And I think I can.
Like, can you see an apple with the wax and the reflection,
sure.
and the reflection on the table?
Yeah, just like in a split, if you're like a cup, like I can picture in this transparent overlay in my mind, whatever that is. There's some.
So you can.
Yeah, there's some visual impression. I would say for anything that I'm doing, like in a drawing, like for most of the process of drawing, I'm reacting to what's on the page. I'm not like referencing anything up there.
I was just curious about the rendering that you have in your mind. I think I had it sort of for the most part of my life, but Art Center sharpened it.
Yeah.
So pushing and pulling polygons and changing surface materials and adding an animation loop even in the scene. I don't know. I guess it is mostly developed, but it started somewhere. And some people, unfortunately, have aphantasia and they can't even. I wonder not that you need it.
No, I don't think you would, because I do think so much of drawing is reacting to what's on the page. So
for concept art, I think part of it, one avenue, isn't just reacting, but also imagining things and thinking about potential ideas, or seeing a cloud and closing your eyes and imagining it to being a bear or something.
Yeah. I have spent a lot of time thinking about how my ideas initially come to me. And to me, do you get a lot of ideas for drawings or something when you're like driving?
Yes.
Like they just pop in, right?
Showering, driving.
Sure.
Anytime I'm like,
So I have spent time paying attention, like what does it look like in my mind when it first pops in? And I've seen that me naturally, the first thing I get is it's black and white. There's never color. And it's always just an impression of a form.
Interesting.
It's a form impression. The first fruit that my mind offers me is, I think what my mind is giving me is It would be something like that. My mind is saying like, it would be very interesting if this was higher and this was lower and this was more punched in and this was more pulled out. I think that's how my brain is dreaming it. That's how it's dreaming it.
Interesting.
And I map the idea that it's in black and white to it just because there's no color info there.
Those are the binary things that
yeah. But what my brain is first offering me is an interesting form. That's what the first thing my brain usually gives me. It never gives me scenes first. Like I need to construct that, right? The natural first fruit that comes up in a driving state or something like that is always just like a form. That's what my brain likes to.
That's different for me.
I figured, dude, when I first had that realization, I was like, I bet that's fucking different for everyone.
Yeah, it's gotta be.
And I bet you it says a lot about what you like naturally are as an artist. And I don't know.
On that note, which doesn't mean one person's way is the right way.
Yeah.
Like each person's unique, let's say, fruit that your brain gives you in that analogy, which is pretty good. Being okay with whatever that is.
I think so, yeah.
For me, it's contextual. Like if sometimes it's not an image, but a feeling. Like I want the feeling of the Lost Woods from Ocarina of Time and the music and whatever. My mind might conjure up like blue and green hues. It might show like the rain coming down, and I'm looking up at it like this. But I think it's up to me to pick the camera angle and then place the tree, place the feeling of the texture of the trees that are taking over the scene, and a little bit of the scene that has light coming through and there's no texture. So I think that's the creative part. But initially it's that feeling. But at the same time, I do have the ability to like bring up a primitive shape and make it complex and texture it and UV map it. But yeah. And
that doesn't seem odd to me at all, because we dream perfectly.
Yeah.
Right? Like dreams are like, who knows what they are, and they might not even actually be being seen, but it's enough that the mind offers the feeling
perception.
that the perception that they're perfect, that they're real as real gets. You know,
dreams are crazy, dude.
Thank you for talking to me about all that. I don't get a lot of time to talk to other artists about this stuff anymore. Also, I feel like most artists want to know how make muscles look good.
What anatomy reference are you looking at?
It's Proco, by the way.
Do you watch the Draftsman podcast?
Yeah.
Dude, Marshall Vandroff.
Yeah, Marshall's so cool.
Got to meet him and talk to him for a bit. Anyway, back to this. Thanks for watching. Thanks for letting me talk on the podcast.
Thank you.
We'll kind of, if you could just like crop it like right here, because
hi. Because what?
I don't know. I just feel like I'm like weirdly dressed with this blue basketball shorts.
Dude, you're chilling, man. I'll scale it up by like 1 to 105%. Sure. It's like the ever smallest.
And for the fanny parts, like just zoom in on her. It's like I want to see the details.
Oh yeah, a lot of fanny dough. Yeah. I don't know what else to close on. That was pretty.
There's nothing to say.
We covered the weirdness pretty.
There's so much to talk about. Still,
there really is. Art is really as broad as it gets, I think.
Our next topic on the next podcast is anti-gravity and the potential of alien life. Right?
Yeah, just
in the orbit. Okay.
All the way into aliens, just right into pure fear. Sure.
Oh man, good stuff.
Strange times.
Yeah,
strange times.
I love sci-fi. Moving on. So thanks for joining in.
Thanks everybody.
I forgot the camera's over here.
We keep looking.
Bye.
Bye everyone. Thanks for being here.
Cut.